Hey guys, so amid all of the Meta acquisitions and Meta trying to throw money at their admittedly really big AI problem right now, wherein Meta is just falling so far behind in the AI industry, a sort of interesting breakup of sorts ended up happening. So one of the companies that Meta has just gotten an extremely large stake in, around the total amount of like 14 billion US dollars, that one company being Scale AI, they actually have, or had, contracts with OpenAI. Now, what Scale AI does is they are a data labeling company. The whole idea is that they take a whole bunch of data that they are given, and then they categorize it out to make it easier for AI trainers to actually, train the models on, the data sets. They help make data sets, is the long story short. And OpenAI is now starting to cut ties with Scale AI. So we're going to go ahead and cover it in today's video. Let's get right into it. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and read this article by Cointelegraph. OpenAI is starting to cut ties with Scale AI amid data labeler's new Meta deal. Now, if you weren't already aware, Meta announced just recently a $14.8 billion deal for a 49% ownership stake in Scale AI. This is one of Meta's second largest acquisitions ever, and will also have the Scale CEO Alexander joining in Meta's sort of AI Avengers team that they've been trying to assemble. And what they're doing is, because of this, OpenAI, according to Bloomberg, is going to start winding down the reliance on this company's data. So basically they're saying, you associate with our competitor, you're done. We're not working with you anymore. So their whole shtick is that they supply labeled data used to train and improve AI models. The startup was founded in 2016, backed by over 100 investors, and is a supplier to popular AI companies, including Anthropic, Cohere, and Adept. I haven't heard of the last two, but I've definitely heard of Anthropic. And it's raised a lot of money in, venture capital funding. You can see here it raised about $100 million in a Series C round in 2019. It's gotten a lot of money. People have been backing this thing like crazy, and it's a pretty big deal, and Meta has gotten a big chunk of it towards itself. Now, there's one thing I do want to point out that's kind of interesting here. OpenAI isn't the only one starting to phase out contracts. One of the other companies that's also starting to phase it out is Google. So the whole idea for all of these companies starting to back out, at least according to another news source, Reuters, is that the move is backed by concerns that the deal could grant Meta insights into how competitors are developing AI models, which is, I guess, a fair concern. Knowing how Meta does business and how many court cases have been brought against them, I don't necessarily blame other companies for having this sort of worried, oh no approach to things, because quite honestly, I probably would too. If Meta had any chance of figuring out what I was doing, I would probably run. Alright, you know what? Fair point. An OpenAI spokesperson told Bloomberg the company started phasing out its contracts with Scale over the past year, seeking more specialized data for its AI models, which admittedly I could also kind of believe. To be fair, Google and OpenAI are large enough at this rate to the point where they can probably do the tasks that this company is doing internally, and they don't really need to outsource that work anymore. Meta's approach, I think, is coming from the prospect of they need to try to get ahead and get to the point of the AI companies like OpenAI and Google. So what they're trying to do as a result is they're trying to cover all of their bases, and if one of those bases is getting more data, then just buy the company that supplies the data. Or at least get a decent stake in it and hire the CEO, which is clearly what they did. So I can kind of see where Meta is going with this. It does make sense. In a statement about the deal, Scale interim CEO Jason, I'm not going to try to pronounce that last name, said that the startup remains unequivocally, I've always had trouble with that word, an independent company, adding that nothing has changed about our commitment to protecting customer data, which, you know what, okay, that's fair. Admittedly, they're going to say this. They're not going to say that we're going to sell all of our users' data to Meta. Like, no, they're not going to say that. That's going to ruin their company. Admittedly, they're not completely owned by Meta. Meta has a very sizable stake in the company, like a humongous stake in the company, but it doesn't mean they're owned directly by them. It's not 100% owned by Meta. This isn't like the Twitter acquisition where Elon Musk owns the entire company. That's not how this is. This is more like they have like an okay chunk that isn't even fully half of the company. So there's other people who own it, and admittedly, if it's not like there's a board of investors and Meta has like a majority of the votes, because they don't. They don't have a majority. So in terms of the control they have, it's a decent amount, but it's not complete control. And for all things considered, it's actually kind of minimal. So it's not like they can just do whatever they please with this company. So the concerns of Scale AI getting insights as to what other AI companies are doing is, I get why AI companies wouldn't want to take the risk, especially OpenAI and Google, especially because Meta is trying to set themselves up as such a big competitor, but I think it's kind of an unfounded concern, and even if it was a founded concern and Scale AI did send a lot of this data to Meta, then that's just begging for like a court case. That's a lawsuit waiting to happen. So the chances of something like that happening are, in my opinion, very, very, very slim. Not necessarily impossible, but slim. Now, it's I can kind of see where Meta is going with this. They're hiring the CEO of this company. And it's not a very well-known company. I will say that. It's not a well-known company. Not many people know about this company. And they hired the CEO for this sort of like Avengers AI team that Meta is trying to compose. And part of that also involved Meta trying to scalp some of OpenAI's own like employees. So they're getting serious about this. They're trying to get anyone and everyone they can. They're even trying to get GitHub's former CEO. They're trying to get everybody they can. They are propping themselves up. They're getting all the sort of ammunition they need. They are propping themselves up for this AI battle that they're going to get into between Google and OpenAI. So they're trying to make themselves a serious competitor. And part of that is just literally buying a good chunk of the company that they get data from. It's kind of genius. They're really trying here. And I can kind of see what they're going at here. I get it. Now, here's the thing. I brought this up in a couple videos before, and I'm going to bring it up again. Is the solution to Meta's problem throwing more money at it? In my opinion, maybe, but it's very, very iffy. It's 50-50 in my opinion. The issue with Meta throwing more money at the problem is that there's some things in the management side of things and like a bunch of other areas that can very much so stunt a company like this. For example, Apple, with the Apple Intelligence and everything, that whole debacle was because they hired a incompetent person and they changed up their managerial structure in such a way where it kind of made that entire team utterly dysfunctional. So even though they're hiring so many good people, they should also probably take the approach of figuring out how that section of their company works and whether or not it's actually working the way it should. Because a lot of the things that are bringing down some of these companies, at least in the AI race, is the management structure of the AI teams. And, well, some of the companies just haven't been doing it right. So as much as Meta is trying to throw money at the problem, and sometimes that can work, hiring new people can help, it doesn't always help. So they need to be very careful here, because they could just be making a ginormous investment without much warranted need, you know what I mean? Like, they could just be making this huge investment for, frankly, kind of no reason. So they need to be careful, because if their management structure is what's mostly the problem here, they could have just spent billions of dollars for nothing. So again, they need to be careful here about these moves, because these are some pretty big moves. But the other thing I need to point out is that a majority of what these news companies have been reporting from people who work at Meta is that Mark Zuckerberg is doing this mostly out of frustration. Most people don't tend to do good things out of frustration. Like, if you've ever done something out of frustration, something that's dumb and you might have thought it helped, but it didn't really help, when you're angry and frustrated, it doesn't always turn out the way you want, because sometimes you do things like irrationally, you do quick decisions, and I don't know if throwing all this money at the problem is going to help. I feel like there needs to be a much more broad analysis into why Meta just isn't really in the race anymore. But maybe they already did that. Again, this is coming from a third-person perspective. I don't work at Meta. I probably never will, frankly. I don't really like them as a company. But I don't work there. I can't tell you what's going on behind closed doors. I can give you educated guesses and opinions based off of what news people are reporting and just what I know about the company itself, but I can't tell you with 100% certainty. Even then, if I knew that kind of information, I wouldn't be sharing it on YouTube, because that's a good way of getting lawyers knocking on my door, which I don't want. If you're at all curious, by the way, side tangent, just real quick, if you're kind of curious about how news companies like this can get away with posting all this like interesting insider information, some of it's because there are laws that protect journalists against like there are some laws around journalism and stuff like that that protect companies like Bloomberg and allow them to post stuff about, like, you know, new iPhones and stuff like that. However, the whistleblowers behind them, you know, they could face legal action. It's kind of a whole thing. It's very interesting. But yeah, I don't know if throwing money at the problem is going to solve it. I really don't know. I hope Meta knows what they're doing, because if they don't, then they can easily put themselves in a lot of debt. They're one of the biggest companies, but even if you're a big company, you can still waste that money very, very fast. So they need to be very careful. They need to be very, very careful, in my opinion. That is about it for today's video. Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Like, comment, subscribe. Take care, you guys, and remember to stay safe out there.